Joining us now for some Farm Journal Insights, we have Joe Vaclavik of Standard Grain, a familiar face here on the show, but he is also the host of Grain Market and Other Stuff podcast. He's joining us this weekend. Joe, you had a 30-minute conversation with Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins earlier this week. I know you hit on fertilizer prices, input prices overall, beef. I mean, you talked about the whole gamut, but what were your biggest takeaways?
We had 30 minutes. I could have used 3 hours. We had a lot of questions that I didn't get to. We had a lot of follow-up questions that I would have liked to have asked, but I didn't want to spend the whole 30 minutes on one question. I think the stuff about input costs might have been my biggest takeaway. I was pleasantly surprised that the secretary was as aware of the input cost situation as she was. She talked about fertilizer. She talked about seed. She talked about interest rates. She talked about a lot of things. And I think that the administration is aware that input costs are a big problem. Are they going to be able to get input costs down? That's a different question because it's very difficult to do that in an inflationary environment. You know, historically speaking, input costs on the farm, they go up, and when they go up, they don't really come down very much. So I think that they've got a tough task ahead of them, but I was pleasantly surprised by her answers there. It wasn't anything tangible. It wasn't like, hey, here's the exact game plan. They're not that far along yet, but I guess I liked what I heard.
Yeah, and Joe, she did, she acknowledged that they are creating a plan. And one thing I thought, a point that you brought up is you put up that chart that shows input prices over the last several years. And you also put up a chart that shows the amount of government payments and ad hoc payments that have gone out to producers and correlated that. What I thought was interesting is she acknowledged that this continuous, tariff aid payments and those government payments, that is only fueling input prices. She described it as a hamster wheel that she says she knows agriculture and really the ag economy relies on and they have to get off of. But one thing I think was really important that she said was it's going to be really hard to change that. What was your takeaway from that?
She was telling the truth. It's going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, to change the structure here. This is not something new. This is something that's been going on for decades. Direct payments, assistance, subsidies, all that sort of those sorts of things. What those things do, and in a year like this, if they do another direct payment deal, if it's an ECAP or MFP style, whatever it is, it's a Band-Aid and it'll keep farmers in business for another year. But it disrupts the natural cycle of the markets. We've got low prices right now in corn, soybeans, and wheat. And in the natural cycle of markets, low prices would discourage production and they would eventually things would be put back in balance. But when you're subsidizing farmers to produce crops that don't make money, it disrupts the natural cycle of the markets. And it's actually going to make it a lot more difficult to dig ourselves out of this.
Joe Vaclavik of Standard Grain. Also, you can check out that conversation at Grain Markets and Other Stuff podcast. Joe, thank you so much. All right, we need to take a quick break, and then we are set to see some brutally cold temperatures, not just for this time of year, just some brutal cold. We're talking single digits in the northern plains as well as below freezing in the Delta. But the drought is actually fueling that cold. We'll tell you why. It's a conversation with Drew Lerner next.